the mother mind within every one of you human beings. Our people believe that every human being, male or female, has got two minds. The mother mind and the warrior mind. The warrior month looks at things logically. The warrior month says 2 + 2 is 4, but the mother mind says nothing of that kind. The mother mind, I don't know how I can explain. The mother mind does not think in a line way as warriors do. The mother mind thinks sideways, and upwards and downwards. We must awaken the mother mind within us. We must feel what is going on in the world. We mustn't just listen to newspapers. We must ourselves feel. It is said by the Zulu people that women think with their pelvic area where children grow and are born. We must think that way. I must no longer look at a tree, but I must see a living entity like me in that thing. I must no longer look at a stone, but I must see the future lying dormant in that stone. What minerals are there? That's all.
Spirituality is a way of accepting the fact that there is a spiritual force in the universe larger than all of mankind. But someone had to come along and invent a word called God. And someone had to say of another God and say, mine is better than yours. And someone had to create faith. Someone said, I have the true faith. Religion is the organization of spirituality into something that became the handmaiden of conquerors. Nearly all religions were brought to people and imposed on people by conquerors and used as the framework to control their mind. My main point here is that if you are the child of God and God is a part of you, then in your imagination, God's supposed to look like you. And when you accept a picture of the deity assigned to you by another people, you become the spiritual prisoners of that other people.
The representation of God should always be the great. It should always be the black, because it can produce all things. The representation of God should always be the great. It should always be the black, because it can produce all things. The representation of God should always be the great. It should always be the black, because it can produce all things. The representation of God should always be the great. It should always be the black.
Why are black people more diagnosed with schizophrenia than anybody else in this country? Because soon when a white person hears a black person talk about your grandmother came to talk to you last night, she's been dead for 10 years, they get a little crazy. See, black people, we talk to the spirits. We're spirited.
Right.
Yes,
But you got to be careful what you say to white people, because white people don't believe in spirit.
That's right.
White psychology doesn't believe in spirit. The word psyche was an African word that meant soul. Psychology is supposed to be study of the spirit. But because white people don't believe in the spirit, they translate psyche to mean mind, study of the organic brain. As African people, we believe in study of the soul. You see, there's a big difference there. So when you go to the psychiatrist, the psychologist talking about something, my grandmother came and told me last night that I need to play this number to hit the lottery. They gonna think you crazy till you hit that damn lottery. Then they're gonna realize she must have really came and talked to you. You see. And black folk, we gotta remember that we gotta stay in contact with our ancestors because they are always with us. Your living dead, your cousins, your nieces and nephews, your grandparents, great-great-great-grandparents. You got to call on their name. You gotta have your plant at home and pour your libation in the morning and just call their name. Water is a conduit for energy and information.
Yes,
so we pour the water because it invokes the energies of the universe. We do not worship our ancestors. We honor them.
That's right.
We honor them. We worship God. The belief in one God is an African concept. It doesn't come from Christianity or Islam. We had it way before Jesus and Muhammad was born. It's ours. We honor our ancestors just like we honored them when they were living. We honor them when they're dead. Because in the African tradition, your deceased relatives have the power to intercede on your behalf in this life. You keep calling on God to solve your problems when God put other spiritual beings in your midst to help you solve those problems. The problem is you're not going through the spiritual hierarchy. You have to go through your ancestors first. God sent you to the earth through your ancestors. And if you want to get back to God, you got to go back through your ancestors. You want to skip around your ancestors, which is the equivalent to disrespect.
Yes.
And you wonder why your prayers don't get answered.
Come on.
We got to go back and get what we lost as a people. People always ask me, what's the difference between religion and spirituality? It's real simple. Religion has all the answers. They know every damn thing in one book.
Right.
Spirituality doesn't have all the answers. In spirituality, you're taught that you got to create your own path.
Yeah.
It is uniquely individual. African spiritual systems don't have dogma. They have principles of spirituality, and that's it. You're not forced to accept this person and believe in this person. It's irrelevant. It's largely that's dogma. Religion was created by the Europeans to control the way people think. That's why whenever someone conquers a land, they take over the church, they take over the school, they take over the military. They take over the church so they can spiritually incarcerate the victims. They take over the school so they can mentally incarcerate the victims. And they take over the police force so they can physically incarcerate. But guess what? If you've taken over the church and you control the schools, you don't even need a military because the oppressed will kill each other. And that's why the two most important institutions for us is the school and the church, but you have to control them. The problem with the church is that most of them is getting that FBI money, faith-based initiative money.
Come on, brother.
Which has made most of your pastors the new COINTELPRO. Their job is to spy on black revolutionary behavior and report it downtown. That's how they stay good with the district attorney. Talking about religion ain't political. Religion is the most political thing in existence.
The oldest belief in God in Africa was that God is a mother.
Most people today can tell you the main tenets of mainstream religions, even if they do not follow that particular ideology or system, as there has been sufficient education to make people aware of their guiding philosophies. But can we say the same when it comes to African belief systems?
African religion is simply being able to understand and interpret nature and cosmology so that you can be aligned with it and in harmony with it, which will then allow you to build your artificial ecology called society based on those principles that you've learned from the natural ecology called nature.
Every morning, I do libation, 3 drops of water to the earth. And as I do this gesture, with my heart, with my soul, then the water, the earth.
There are many different ways that spirit shows itself in our life. And because we are human beings who for the most part have been cultivated away from welcoming spirit in its original form. Spirit must then learn to show itself in the forms that we can accept. So the dream form is another way. And in fact, in my tradition, dreams are ritual performed by our soul along with other spirit on our behalf, because in our awake life, those are the places we resist going. And so the dream becomes the bridge between us and the spirit world. And the question often is, are you aware of them? How much distraction do you have around you? Are you even paying attention when they come and nudge you? Or do they have to send you a harder message for you to actually be
It brought a deep understanding of who I am. And for those who have never known what Kundalini Yoga is the yoga of experience. So the training has brought a lot of experiences that I never knew existed within me. I've always believed that knowledge is always out there, but knowledge is within me. So I would say that this training has made me aware that there's vast knowledge within me. And I feel that the knowledge that I have within me, I can share it out. And one of the most interesting thing about Kundalini Yoga is that when I look at you as a person, I don't see you, I see me. And when you look at me, you see yourself. So in other words, we are one. And I would say that this training has made me connect with everything around me.
And once we separate, not so much as separate spirituality from religions, and understand that out of our spirituality came the world's religions, the God concept of those religions, of Judaism, Christianity, or Islam, came out of what I refer to as pre-God religions. I don't use that anymore because people don't understand what I mean about pre-God religions. They're so accustomed to the word God, they cannot understand that there was a time when man thought of a force in the universe presiding over the universe, and while he meant God, he did not use the word God, and man had more spirituality before he consistently used the word God. He used the God force and the God concept without using the word. He meant the same thing, and ultimately Western man interpreted that as meaning the same thing. Spirituality is a way of accepting the fact that there is a spiritual force in the universe larger than all of mankind.
Let's go back during the time of antiquity. The word antiquity means ancient time.
Yes.
There was no religion, no place on planet Earth. You have to realize that. Going back into Africa, you will find the Africans living in the continent of Africa not having a religion, but they had a spiritual way of life that included the ancient Egyptians also. They paid homage to their ancestors. They paid homage to nature. They knew the laws, the cosmic laws of the universe, and they lived their lives according to these various laws of the universe.
Man must be in harmony with nature. Man must not be in a violent struggle against the elements. And that man and God and nature are in partnership one to the others. And all of the elements work with man, and all life is linked together in cause and effect. In a harmonious chain, there was no death, but a continuation of life. European concept of life is a violation of harmony. When you look at Russia and the United States, look at their struggle to control the world, it makes no sense. It is out of harmony. Not only with nature, it is out of harmony with common sense.
Into something deep. But again, look very closely. Now that we have broken that down, you see that this person has become what is called a netter, or a spiritual one, or has become God-like, because he rose up his pineal gland, as you see the serpent here. Now his third eye is open. His spiritual eye is open. Okay? So again, we looked at nature. We used symbols. Why did we use symbols? Because symbols operated on the collective consciousness of the mind. Okay? We still have, as Brother Dr. Richard King pointed out, which he expounds on this very well from his research, that even though they have destroyed our libraries, they have not destroyed our genetic libraries that's in us. It's just lying there dormant. All we have to do is open it up. It is here that our ancestors had us study from the 42 books of Tahuti, representing science, law, and intelligence, who was represented as the ibis bird that you saw. We saw those little white birds that we saw come over here. So our ancestors looked at nature. We didn't worship the bird, but it was an attribute of science, attribute of intelligence. Tahuti writing down the deeds of our life on earth as we lived here. This is where the Western philosophical thought, Greeks took their concept of Hermes Trismegistus from Tahuti, now called thought too. Again, our ancestors looked at nature to symbolize various attributes of nature. We did not worship insects. We did not worship animals. Okay? They represented various attributes of nature. For instance, the little scarab beetle was symbolized as the great mind. Why? Because the top of the little scarab beetle was identical to the top of the cranial cavity of the brain. So the little scarab was looked at as the great mind of Ptah. That was Ptah's symbol, the scarab, that created the universe. Also how the scarab, okay, would roll up his dung, okay, and make the sun. That was a symbol of being self-created, because the eggs would have to feed from the dung, and that was a symbolic as being self-created. Now, when we see something like this, we say, I sure don't understand what our ancestors was doing back in those days. They put this big bug on this body. What in the world is this? What you see here, remember I said, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and the Spirit of God moved across the deep. Okay? So we see nothing but darkness. The scarab symbolized Ptah, black. The red body symbolized the sun that was created. Our ancestors saw ourselves in relationship with that of nature. We were totally connected with nature. We did not worship animals and insects. There were various attributes, because we looked at nature for our communication. Okay? That's why we were not destructive towards nature. So what we see is mind over body. And that's how we see the little scarab creating the sun, because it's red, like you see the body here is being red. The body was looked at as the great sun. That's why you call your sun the sun today. Symbolized as that sun. Okay? So here we see the little scarab rolling up the dung, was symbolic as how Ptah rolled up the sun in the universe and created the light. This was all symbolic and all various attributes. Now you can see all three pyramids. Now on the further back is the pyramid of Khufu, Khafra, and Menkaure. Keep in mind, brothers and sisters, that our ancestors had astronomical science, astrology, where they studied the stars and so forth. One of the things that's been brought to astronomers' attention is that they noticed that the pyramid of Khufu and Khafra, if you notice right here, are in a perfect alignment. Okay? It's a perfect alignment. But the question is that why would such a perfect alignment and perfect structure where they built the small pyramid of Menkaure off course? Can you see it off course? Yeah. But what they found, though, is that our ancestors were building the pyramids in alignment with the stars, that they were in rhythm with the astrology and the astronomical science of the universe, science of astrology, or the study of the stars. And what they found is that the star system Orion was the star system of Osiris. Remember, the king wants to become one with Osiris. So by aligning the pyramid of Khufu, Khafra, and Menkaure with Orion, and that's why they built the pyramid of Menkaure slightly over and not in alignment, because the pyramids were built off the alignment of the star system Orion. the star system Ceres was Isis. So our ancestors, in essence, were building heaven on earth. They were taking the science of the stars and building the pyramids exactly as they saw the heavenly body, or the cosmological universe. Figure out why Menkaura's pyramid was not in a perfect alignment, but it fits with the alignment of the star system Orion. As well as the other pyramid layout, it fits into the constellation that our ancestors saw of Osiris. And that is the constellation of the man that they have today as a figure of a man. So you can take and put the star system Orion right over the pyramid of Khufu, Khafra, and Menkaura and see why they had the alignment of Menkaura slightly over, because it fit with the star system Orion, because the purpose was for the soul to ascend into heaven, for the spirit to ascend into heaven, to become one with Osiris. And the star system Orion was connected with Osiris. Keep in mind that the star system Orion was aligned perfectly with the chambers of the pyramids that we're going to deal with later on in our lecture series when we get into it. So this is serious knowledge to show you how profound our ancestors saw that they were building and with the constellation of the universe. Tomorrow when you go into Saqqara, you're also going to see the Pyramid of Unas, showing the first concept of ascension into heaven. Long before there was Christianity, long before there were little white angels with wings under, that we get a concept that we're going to go to heaven, Unas already had the concept of ascension into heaven, or a spirit going into heaven, known as astrotheology. So this is what our ancestors saw, the soul becoming one with the great god Osiris in the constellation of Orion, which was the symbol for Osiris. And the star system Ceres was for Isis. Powerful astronomical knowledge that our ancestors had, showing how in tune our ancestors were with the heavenly bodies. In essence, building heaven.
Ancestral, your cultural heritage. Because if you're asleep to that, you are asleep spiritually. And if you're asleep spiritually, you can be oppressed and manipulated.
Juju, voodoo, evil, apparently. If you want to say Obia and Juju and Ifa and everything else African is evil, it is simply a tool that we have given. It is a God-given tool. It is a tool that exists in the universe. Use it for good, use it for bad. I was always taught that you use it for good.
The first Christian worshipped Jesus at the end of a whip. He didn't choose to worship that. How would you choose the religion of your oppressor? It makes no sense.
But I would argue and say that no, Christianity is actually, it predates your traditional beliefs, because the spirit was there before everything happened.
The tradition, the culture, is to do with the universe and our place in it. Religion doesn't deal with that. Religion deals with one person. They have personalized God.
You know, the other reason why African religions are so maligned and bedeviled is because if religion covers your total being. So if you follow your religion, it means that you're servicing your total self.
She didn't believe in doctors or anything. She was her own doctor. She was guided by nature. If you were ill, she knew what bush, what to do, what prayers, that's her way. But to everybody else, she's an Obia woman.
African belief systems have not been given the same mainstream attention or concentrated research. That is why we don't understand them, and which is why it's deemed negative. It's just lack of understanding.
It may function as an organic superconductor at room temperature. Now, this is something that's almost unheard of. Most of your superconductors are not organic. They're inorganic. And then you don't conduct electricity at room temperature. Superconduction in these inorganic systems are done when it's very, very cold.
Give me examples of what you're talking about.
Minus 400 and some degrees K.
Okay.
You have to get down very, very low in temperature in order for electrons to travel through a metal object, copper or whatever whatever superconductor they use. And in order for it to flow, superconduction begin to flow with no resistance. So in order for electricity to flow through an electrical cord with no resistance, that's superconducting.
All right, clear.
Okay? Now, it's done at very low temperatures. You can't do it at room temperature. And what's fascinating is that melanin appears to be able to do it at room temperature.
The significance of that being?
The ability to transmit information almost at will. I mean, at no resistance. You know, if you got some information here in your brain or something happens down here, well, it's there before you can even think about it.
Okay.
That information has been processed and sent here.
Okay.
So with no resistance of that electrical information being sent to the brain to be processed, in other words, it goes there really fast with no resistance, which may translate into the quickness of the black athlete.
Now, you said melanin is able to process information without sending it to the brain also, right? Would you explain that? Is that true? Or?
Now, melanin having all of these functional groups. Remember, we talked about amine, carboxylic acid, ether, aromatic rings, double bonds, all of these functional groups. And all basically you're looking at is an information processor.
The fact that in order to understand ourselves as a people, you have to understand the mothership. The mothership is melanin. Melanin is the cornerstone to all life, in not just on our earth, but in the universe and in everything that we see manifesting itself. And the first 2 times I came really was a piece that dealt with the physical. Because as you said earlier, I look at melanin, in fact, our ancient Kemetic ancestors, Native American peoples in the ancient world, the world that is grounded in nature, always looked at things from a physical perspective, a mental perspective, and a spiritual perspective. And everything had its place within these 3 parameters. And so our first 2 presentations, we talked about the physical aspects of it, the fact that melanin is found in every part of our body, that it is in the rivers and the oceans and the lakes. It's an organic life. And the carbon atom, we began with looking at what it is that it's built from. And we looked at the carbon atom and the fact that it is in fact a black atom. And that when you bring enough of these atoms together, impacting on other atoms or elements, if you want to call them that, basically being nitrogen, oxygen, and hydrogen, carbon being introduced to this concept then begins to make multiple types of molecules. And in coming from the melanin molecule, bringing the melanin molecule together, you then have melanosomes. And each time from the carbon atom we're getting from its smallest structure, when you put carbon atoms together, it becomes a molecule, which becomes the melanin molecule. When you put enough melanin molecules together, they are then encased in what is known as a melanosome, which is a granule found within the system. And then out of the melanosomes then make up what is known as the melanocyte. And the melanocyte is the cell. It's the melanin cell. And then that's what produces the many things that we now see. So in the first 2 parts, we looked at the physical aspects. We had instructional supplies that showed how we teach our children this concept. Because to me, I'm an educator. And everything that I look at that I learned from people such as John Henry Clark and from Dr. Joseph Ben Yikkinen and from Dr. Richard King, I try to then develop it into a curriculum for children, because nothing we learn should just be held within ourselves, particularly as an adult. So what I do is I then try to break this down and see where in the curriculum this then fits. So then we found that you can teach melanin when you're dealing with astronomy, you can teach it when you're dealing with chemistry or physics. But where in the curriculum does it fit? It fits when we're talking about biology, when you're teaching about the structure of the eye. There's no way that you can understand how the eye functions if you don't understand the essence of what makes you see. You have rods and cones. Rods is what looks at black and white images, and cones then decipher what is in color. Those do not function without retinal melanin. You would not be able to see without melanin. In your ear, in your inner ear, you would not be able to hear. You would not have balance. So I wanted to show how, when we're teaching about the parts of the body, we can also teach about melanin. The third part, you asked an interesting question going into the third piece when you spoke about, well, I had mentioned something about it being a doorway to the collective unconscious, which then dealt with another aspect of what melanin does, which then goes into the mental piece. So the last time we were together, we tried to talk about the role that melanin plays in being the fuel for mind abilities and control. And again, I want to say, as you said in the first part, and I'm sorry I have to keep repeating this, but I believe that white supremacy makes us constantly have to revert back to me having to say that I am not talking about superiority or inferiority of the human being. That the presence of melanin does not make one superior, but the presence of it, if aware of it, gives you the potential to be as great as you'd like to be. So I say this only because it scares people when we talk about intellect and we talk about melanin and we talk about the greatness of it, particularly when one group has a whole bunch of it and another group has very little of it. Not only do they have a very little bit of melanin, although they do have it, they don't have the ability to process it. So that became another piece. Melanin, with the presence of melanin, understanding how you can energize yourself, understanding your body in relationship to melanin, there are actual things that you can do to heal yourself. And African folk do it every day and we don't even realize. And in fact, if you were to cut yourself and you have something, you see the brown form around your skin, that's actually melanin. That's a doctor, that's an internal doctor healing you. Because if you did not have the ability to heal yourself, you would die of a loss of blood.
Sure.
So I mean, all of these things are wonderful.
You're implying also a role there that foods and diet plays in this.
No question. Food is like what we take internally. There are many different ways that you can develop melanin or improve the process of developing melanin. And the food that you take plays a role, the music that you listen to, the friends and the people that you associate with, your stress level and how you deal with it. If you are a person of a spiritual background that can move your problems aside, all determines. Food, I mean, when you look at food, very important piece, vegetables, very important thing to eat. In particular, something that I enjoy eating is collard greens, and collard greens is very rich in tyrosine. Tyrosine is an amino acid. The enzyme is tyrosinase. Now, tyrosinase as an enzyme is like a catalyst battery that gets this process of melanin going. So that when you have this fundamental principle within you and you are feeding your body the proper fuels, you then will help this process of the development of melanin go on. So in just looking at it and understanding us as an African folk, what we should be doing is looking at eating things that are green, things that have chlorophyll, because chlorophyll in itself is a manifestation of what melanin would produce in terms of organic life. And eating vegetables, and in the rawest state possible is the best. The less you cook, the more nutrients you keep in it. In fact, many times people steam vegetables. Well, in fact, at the end of steaming vegetables, you could throw the vegetables out and drink the liquid, and that would be where all the powerhouse is. So melanin plays a very important role in all of our lives, and there are ways that you can develop it if you're conscious of yourself. We have lost our way, our brother Yero. We are now under a situation that is telling us to eat the wrong things at the wrong time. There are even foods that you should eat at certain times, and you go by nature, you go by the sun. African folk, many years ago, and even to this day, that has not been contaminated by Western civilization, know what to eat, know when to eat it, know the season.
Scientists said that the pineal gland, they refer to the pineal gland as a vestigial organ. That is a calcified gland within the body that serves no purpose, as if the Creator would create something that you didn't need. And it was only after the Vietnam War, in the late 60s and early 70s, that they began to rewrite their interpretation of the pineal gland. The reason for that was that a large number of African Americans fought and died during the Vietnam War. And whenever a soldier dies, there's an autopsy that's performed before their body is sent back to Dover Air Force Base. And what they discovered, what these physicians discovered, is that when they performed the autopsies, the 75 to 80% of the African American soldiers had a large functioning pineal gland. The pineal gland is normally about the size of your thumb. So it was not a vestigial organ in 70 to 80% of African Americans, but it is a calcified organ in 75 to 80% of people with European ancestry. So they began to reevaluate the pineal gland. They began to reevaluate melanin.
See a king with a crown on his head, you'll see that he has 3 jewels, and that's what those jewels represent. They represent the jewels of your brain. You see, the crown was really meant to physically symbolize what was going on the inside. When you look at kings' crowns, they don't have jewels all around. They don't have those prongs all around. They basically have 3. And in ancient Kemetic and many African civilizations, you actually have on the crown they put on their head places where they strategically would be located. Many temples were built, the pyramids were built with these rooms obviously dedicated to these different, what they call the royal three. So you have in the brain the ability to even look at the development and the concept of life.
So you mean people should look beyond the great dialogue and the sword fights when they watch movies?
Oh, absolutely, man, because that's really trying to protect what they're really trying to hide. Because the reality is that all of this is in front of us, and what I attempt to tell our community is that all of this information is here. Mm-hmm. It's not really sometimes even hidden anymore. It's just that it is so scattered in different kinds of situations that it's hard to see it. What I have attempted to do in developing curriculum is bring these together.
Well, you can hide a lot of things in the open.
Oh, absolutely. That's true, too. And again, if you make someone blind to their reality, it could be right in front of them and they still don't see it.
Sure.
You see, but this information is vital to understand in terms of the role that the ventricular system plays. And in this hole in the head, which is the middle hole, what happens at birth, and as this fetus, this body, this essence develops itself, the lateral ventricles squeeze themselves. And in squeezing themselves, as the brain begins to develop, it squeezes itself, and then it opens up a tube that then creates the third ventricle. And you see, the third ventricle, that's the key to what opened up our ability to see ourselves on a spiritual level, to understand our lives on a spiritual level, and to understand the far deeper meanings in life. This stuff we're dealing with now is so shallow. We have been for the past, I would dare say, I know for the past 500 years, we have been devolving as a people. We have been losing our abilities to see the higher levels of consciousness as we try to get all of the sneakers that we possibly can, as we chase after the material world. And we as African people, we like good things. We like good life. You can see the gold of Africa, the clothing of Africa, the kinds of clothing that you're wearing, the jewels that we wore as a people, the foods that we ate. We like the good life. But we're not willing to get the good life at the expense of someone else's life. And I think that this is the problem that we're having now. When we were in Africa amongst ourselves, there was enough to share with everybody. That's what built pyramids.
We talked a little bit. Spiritual development. It's not an area that a lot of people think of in relation to who they are. Mm-hmm. And in the context of African people, the role of melanin.
Sure.
So when you say spiritual development, how do you pose that such that, you know, a person can again relate to the concept as they relate to their spirituality?
Sure. Well, you know, the key is to look at it from an African-centered perspective, or look at it from the way in which we as an African people would look at it, or holistic people, and that is that there are three dynamics. There's the physical, there's the spiritual, and there's the mental. The mental is almost like the mid-entity between the spirit and the physical. And melanin itself is a byproduct, and that it is a viable chemical within our body that releases and allows us to go through the process of life. The symbolism of it is important because when we're talking about King Tut, when we're talking about the 18th dynasty, when we're talking about the kinds of information that we need to be looking at, what we see is that during King Tut's time, the writings that the ancient Kemites wrote about clearly understood certain things about the brain. They understood it on a physical level, they understood the process or the mental level of thinking, and then they understood that upon certain vibratory levels, thinking on certain levels, utilizing the physicalness of the melanin byproduct, that you in fact could raise yourself to spiritual dimensions.
Is the pineal gland the third eye? You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. Here are the facts. Most vertebrates possess a pineal gland. Assuming that you are a human being, your pineal gland is situated deep within your brain, behind your eyes. It's tiny, a little pine cone-shaped thing roughly 1 centimeter long in most people. The pineal gland has some crucial functions. In various animals, it produces hormones that can influence sexual development, hibernation, and more. It also helps regulate your circadian rhythm through the production of a hormone called melatonin. Over the centuries, philosophers have speculated on the role of the pineal gland, and research on it continues today. But some people believe that modern research is missing the point. The pineal gland, they say, does much, much more. It isn't just an endocrine organ. Instead, it's a third eye, and one that can see beyond the limits of our ordinary retina. Here's where it gets crazy. The concept of a third eye dates back into antiquity and is present in both Taoism and Hindu spiritual traditions. For those who believe that the pineal gland has mystical properties such as the ability to perceive the spirit world or allow for precognition, this small organ is the real-life third eye mentioned in ancient religious texts. In earlier centuries, these views weren't controversial. In fact, they were largely accepted by various populations. But how does this claim measure up today? While there's no accepted proof that the pineal gland imparts any sort of extrasensory perception, several authors have argued that there's more to this story. In DMT, the spirit molecule, Rick Strassman suggests that the pineal gland produces a hallucinogen called DMT. This claim has been widely dismissed by the scientific community for lack of clear proof. However, in 2013, researchers at the University of Michigan published a paper in Biomedical Chromatography documenting DMT in the pineal gland of live rodents. More research may eventually reveal surprising insights about the role of the human pineal gland. Or will it? According to some theorists, there's an active effort underway to suppress knowledge of the pineal gland's function. This argument is often associated with the fringes of the anti-fluoridation movement, based on the idea that fluoride accumulates in the pineal gland and damages its normal functions. Advocacy groups such as the Fluoride Action Network claim that fluoride accumulation in the pineal gland can be responsible for a number of deleterious effects, including a repression of melatonin and accelerated sexual maturation. For most of the scientific community and the public at large, the pineal gland is just an often misunderstood endocrine organ, and all the claims of spiritual significance or arcane abilities just come from misunderstandings and confirmation bias. To those like Strassman and others, however, there's more to this story, something the modern age forgot, something the status quo doesn't want you to know.
The lower self was to surrender to the higher self in order to enter the sacred space. This meant that the ego of the everyday world had to step aside, while the higher self connected with cosmic energy.
A vulture can fly, snake can't fly. But both have the same glands. System of life is based on glands.
The glands were the most important features of the human being.
One of the most misunderstood functions of the human body today is our glandular or endocrine system. Glands secrete hormones that trigger reproduction. Fertility and procreation had high value in Egyptian ideology. Ancient teachings speak of 7 energy centers in the body called chakras. Parallels occur between the concepts of chakras, or energy centers in the body, and our glands. It appears they are 2 ways of describing the same thing, through spirituality and through science. Ancient Egyptians had a holistic understanding of the significance of the glands and their central role in reproduction and in consciousness. If we can decode the symbols, we see that the sacredness of procreation is readily visible in ancient Egyptian art.
When you see a boy or a man, you see a kind of a bottle on his head. That is not a bottle or not a white crown symbolizing Upper Egypt, as my colleagues and the scholars say. No, this is a gland in the human body known as the thymus, located behind the lungs.
The thymus is most active when a baby is in utero. It continues to be active until puberty. Then it begins to shrink and is atrophied when we stop being fertile. It was a critical activator of consciousness.
The red crown is another. It's the womb, the placenta. The thymus and the womb are connected for the cycle of life. When you see the double crown, the red crown is the womb and the placenta, The white crown is the thymus, who has its influence on the womb. That's the symbol of one of the glands.
In the early 1900s, alchemist Schwoller de Lubitz presented a work called The Temple of Man. It demonstrated that the architects of the Luxor temple used sacred geometry, which reflected the exact proportions of the human body. As in all Egyptian temples, the most sacred space was located at the back of the temple, the Holy of Holies, which corresponded to the pineal gland. When activated, the pineal gland is said to stimulate the evolution of higher states of consciousness. If the temples were metaphors of the human body, the pineal gland corresponded with the Holy of Holies.